A silent warning from the Russian central bank exposed what Moscow tries to hide. The economy is already in freefall, but while the collapse appears in the numbers, state TV talks about growth. But when bankers turn to Bloomberg to warn of the end, it's because there's no way out inside the Kremlin. Debt has gone from 50 to 115 trillion rubles in 4 years. 25% interest rates are bankrupting factories, and 1,000 men are lost every day at the front. The country's last living sector is war, and without it, nothing can survive. Drones are manufactured on Monday, destroyed on Wednesday, and reordered on Friday, while contracts offer bonuses of 3 million rubles per soldier. With each passing day, billions evaporate in salaries, funerals, and ammunition. And the question no one answers is simple: what happens the day the engine of war stops, and along with it, Russia's entire economic base? A simple leak to Bloomberg was enough to shake the markets. The Russian central bank itself let slip that the financial system is unraveling now, not tomorrow. At the beginning of 2020, public debt hovered around 50 trillion rubles. In less than 4 years, that figure exploded to 115 trillion, more than $1.5 trillion. No economy grows at that rate without monetary doping. Moscow, however, sold the explosion as prosperity, encouraging citizens to borrow even for home improvements. And for those unable to pay, there was a direct way out: sign military contracts and exchange debt for blood. But this temporary relief only increased the bubble. With subsidies scattered like confetti and inflated military salaries, the state machine began creating artificial wealth it could not sustain. At the same time, war spending multiplied, absorbing civilian resources and transforming personal debts into combat contracts. On the surface, it looked like a virtuous cycle: young people buying apartments, factories hiring workers, restaurants packed. But underneath, the foundation was fragile: unpayable debts, war subsidies, and easy credit. Contrary to what the propaganda portrayed, this wasn't prosperity, but a house of cards ready to fall. And the collapse began early. 25% interest rates suffocated already teetering companies, while indebted workers saw stagnant wages and businesses shutter in droves. When even establishment bankers began turning to the foreign press to warn of the collapse, it became clear that the implosion wasn't a theory. It was an ongoing reality. But if the civilian economy was already in freefall, what followed would reveal an even darker conflict. When everything turns into war, even economic logic becomes a weapon. The first cracks soon appeared. Real incomes didn't grow, productivity didn't rise, and the government simply drowned the economy and borrowed money, hoping no one would notice. But the bills started arriving. The same couple who had financed the apartment saw their salaries freeze and their credit card debt explode. The factory that had previously hired them was now unable to sell inventory, laying off workers and defaulting on loans. Restaurants that had opened in a booming climate closed their doors. What seemed like stability turned into a chain reaction: empty shelves, unpaid loans, maxed out credit cards, and shuttered stores across the country. But Moscow's response was even more suffocating. The central bank raised interest rates to 25%, trying to curb inflation and stem the bleeding. For companies already on the brink of collapse, the decision was a death sentence. Some even took risks, taking out loans at absurd rates just to survive for a few more weeks. The result was an even larger debt bubble, extended briefly but with a lethal cost. Defaults soared, liquidity dried up, and the banking system went into silent freefall. And here, the starkest contrast emerges. When the regime's own bankers begin whispering warnings to the foreign press instead of the government, it means the game is already up. But the Kremlin's reaction wasn't to rescue the civilian economy. It was to double down on the war. Today, according to internal calculations, Russia loses about 1,000 working-age men every day, killed, wounded, or missing. It's as if an entire factory were disappearing every day. In 2 months, that number exceeds the total number of employees on the Moscow subway. And these weren't just soldiers. They were engineers, drivers, welders, electricians, the men who kept the real economy running. But if every death opens a hole in civilian industry, for the Kremlin, every lost body also strengthens the war machine. And this is the point at which the economy and the front cease to be separate stories and merge into a single collapse. The Kremlin didn't try to rebuild the civilian economy. It did the opposite. It pushed what was left straight into the war machine. New drone factories, tank assembly lines, and recruitment offices mushroomed. But the machinery created is a vicious cycle. The state itself is both supplier and customer. Drones are manufactured on Monday, destroyed on Wednesday, and ordered again on Friday. It's a self-destructive cycle that only continues because there are still oil revenues sustaining the illusion. But even this pillar is beginning to shake. Global energy demand is shifting, oil prices are volatile, and Western sanctions are increasingly stinging. Unlike the Soviet Union, Russia doesn't have massive stockpiles to resist. Every missile purchased from North Korea must be paid for upfront. With no credit, no barter, every bullet has a price tag. At the same time, domestic consumption is disappearing. Giants like Wildberries and Ozon report sharp declines, not for lack of interest, but because the Russian middle class is broke. Wages frozen, credit cards maxed out, accounts empty. The contrast is stark. The only financially stable layer today is made up of soldiers, but they don't consume. They don't drive the civilian economy. They spend their income trying to survive. Meanwhile, the richest buy one-way tickets to Dubai. At the top, a few economists remain warning about the model's unsustainability. They've presented calculations and called for reforms, but they're not being listened to. Decisions are in the hands of loyalists who say yes to everything, even if it means accelerating the implosion. And herein lies the central complication. When economic logic itself is treated as Western propaganda, every last break disappears. And what comes next shows that the problem is no longer just financial ruin, but the complete transformation of the country into a permanent war system. Record rates, abrupt policy shifts, and secret meetings with foreign observers do not demonstrate strength, but desperation. Within Moscow, fear is growing that even the few remaining technicians will be removed and replaced by ideologues who call debt an illusion and inflation a Western invention. Once this line is crossed, there is no return. What is being built is not just a debt bubble, but a ticking economic time bomb. But the conflict is even more severe in the military arena. Spending continues to soar. Last year, Russia launched about 50 drones a day. Now it is 500. Every 24 hours, tens of millions of dollars disappear in strikes and replacements. And even then, it is not enough. To attract new recruits, the government offers bonuses of 3 million rubles per soldier, not counting salaries, pensions, and medical coverage. Every missile produced, every funeral paid for, every trained soldier feeds a machine that has no pause button. The contrast is clear. While propaganda insists on portraying stability, the last pillar of the Russian economy is already war itself, and the risk is even greater. The day the conflict ends could be the day the entire remaining structure collapses along with it. The army is no longer just a combat tool. It has become the backbone of the system. And it is at this point that the narrative shifts from crisis to collapse. With each passing day, the cost increases, time shortens, and the line of return disappears. But what has not yet been shown is how far this cycle can extend and what happens when the last cog in this engine breaks. The war has gone from being just a military front to transforming the entire Russian economy into a survival machine. This means that every ruble, every factory, and every worker now revolves around a system that burns through resources without creating a future. And the question remains grim. When this machine breaks down, what will come next? Reconstruction or an even greater collapse?